Have you ever felt pulled into someone, not because they loved you, but because they knew how to make you feel needed? There's a moment, quiet, brief, when something doesn't feel right. She's smiling, she's soft, nothing is wrong, but your body tightens anyway. And instead of listening to that signal, you override it. You call it anxiety. You call it your past. You call it your fault. Because you've been trained by culture, by family, by your own unfinished story to mistake discomfort for depth. You were told that a good man is patient, that he stays, that he doesn't judge a woman by her wounds. But some wounds don't need healing, they need power. And when pain becomes a tool for control, love becomes a performance you are required to maintain. Carl Jung didn't just study the unconscious. He warned what happens when a man fails to see how easily his desire to protect can be used against him. Because some women don't seek love, they seek emotional leverage. And when a man doesn't understand projection, shadow, and the deeper patterns of manipulation, he won't hear himself being broken. He'll only hear the voice that tells him, try harder. This isn't about hating women, it's about seeing clearly. Because the most dangerous kind of control isn't loud. It's soft, subtle, disguised as love. And until you see it, you'll keep calling submission devotion and self-abandonment masculinity. These are the 7 psychological truths Carl Jung revealed. Truths the modern world refuses to teach you about emotional power, feminine shadow, and the quiet ways men lose themselves while believing they're being strong. The first 6 will confront what she's doing. The last will confront why you allowed it. You need both. Clarity only arrives when all 7 are seen together, so stay until the end. Truth 1. In analytical psychology, the persona represents the social mask, crafted to gain acceptance and conceal vulnerability. When an individual becomes over-identified with this mask, it doesn't simply shield the self, it becomes a tool of influence. In the context of intimate relationships, this becomes particularly dangerous when the mask is used not to relate, but to control. A woman who is fused with her persona may present as gentle, vulnerable, or emotionally fragile. She does not dominate through command. Instead, she exerts pressure through implication, withdrawal, silence, and subtle shifts in energy. The manipulative power lies in what remains unsaid. The partner is not openly accused, yet is made to feel responsible, not criticized, yet made to apologize. This creates a psychological bind in which relational responsibility is transferred without verbal acknowledgement. This dynamic is rarely conscious. The woman may not believe she is manipulating at all. She may genuinely identify with her helplessness, but that identification becomes her leverage. The more she remains emotionally passive, the more power she gains, not through assertion, but through the silent shaping of her partner's behavior. Every retreat becomes a test. Every unspoken disappointment becomes a moral indictment. Carl Jung warned that what is repressed does not disappear. It returns in distorted form. When aggression is denied in the persona, it reemerges in covert patterns, guilt induction, emotional absence, and moral subtlety. The appearance of innocence is not inherently deceptive, but when it remains unexamined, it enables control while avoiding accountability. In this structure, the man is no longer a partner. He becomes a performer, editing speech, anticipating mood shifts, managing tone. His inner world contracts around an emotional environment he cannot name yet feels bound to protect. The relationship ceases to be a mutual exchange of truth and becomes a silent ritual of psychological appeasement. This is not the result of malice. It is the consequence of unconscious identification with the persona, where emotional fragility becomes a mechanism of control and virtue becomes a mask worn to avoid confrontation with the shadow. Truth 2. In Jungian psychology, the anima represents the unconscious feminine within the male psyche. When projected outward, especially in romantic relationships, it often appears as idealization, enchantment, or an irresistible emotional pull. But when the anima is fragmented, when it lacks integration, it does not guide a man toward wholeness. It pulls him toward psychological intoxication. The emotionally chaotic woman is not simply unstable. She is compelling. Her volatility registers as vitality. Her unpredictability mimics depth. She is not consistent, but she is alive. And in that aliveness, she becomes a mirror for the man's own disowned emotional intensity. This dynamic is seductive precisely because it bypasses logic. She disappears, returns without explanation, cries with intensity, and laughs without restraint. The relationship oscillates between emotional extremes, creating a rhythm that is mistaken for passion. In reality, this rhythm mimics the nervous system patterns of trauma bonding: anticipation, reward, deprivation, relief. Carl Jung described the danger of falling into the projection of an unintegrated anima, a woman not experienced as she is, but as an archetype. In this case, the woman serves not as a partner, but as a conduit for unresolved longing. Her chaos becomes the ground upon which the man reenacts his internal disorganization. He believes he is stabilizing her, but in truth, he is outsourcing his own emotional disorientation. The woman who lives through chaos is often acting out unconscious wounds. Her behavior is not designed to destroy, but to generate sensation, to avoid stillness, to preserve a sense of control through disorder. The moment things become calm, she introduces disruption, not to harm the relationship, but to prevent intimacy from becoming a mirror of her own unhealed self. In such relationships, the man does not experience growth. He experiences erosion. He sacrifices clarity in exchange for closeness. He becomes exhausted by the constant recalibration of mood and meaning. And over time, he begins to equate this exhaustion with love. This is not emotional depth. It is mutual dysregulation disguised as connection. And unless the cycle is broken, it does not lead to intimacy. It leads to identity loss through prolonged emotional exposure to instability. Truth 3. In psychological terms, innocence becomes dangerous not when it is false, but when it is strategic. A woman who has not consciously integrated her capacity for direct expression may instead rely on subtle emotional mechanisms to shape the relational field. This does not resemble overt dominance. It resembles delicacy, softness, withdrawal. The weaponization of innocence occurs when vulnerability is used not to connect, but to create moral leverage. The woman appears fragile, perhaps wounded, perhaps shy. She speaks in suggestions, not demands. She rarely criticizes directly. Instead, she distances. She becomes quiet. She looks away. And in doing so, she transmits discomfort without responsibility. This dynamic provokes the partner into over-functioning. He tries to fix the unspoken. He anticipates her needs. He internalizes her silence as a reflection of his failure. Over time, he becomes emotionally subordinate to the unsaid. Her pain becomes his fault, even when it was never voiced. Jung's theory of repression applies directly here. What is not acknowledged in the self returns as a manipulative force. When the feminine impulse toward assertion is denied, it reemerges as emotional withholding. It no longer confronts. It seduces. It controls by making the partner feel morally obligated to maintain harmony at all costs. Importantly, this pattern is rarely conscious. The woman may truly believe she is not controlling anything. She may view her silence as sensitivity, her withdrawal as self-protection, but the relational outcome reveals the truth. Her discomfort becomes central. Her emotional state becomes the organizing principle of the relationship. In this structure, the man is no longer engaging with a partner. He is managing a system. His truth becomes secondary to emotional preservation. He calibrates, shrinks, and edits, not out of fear, but out of conditioned loyalty to an idea. that love means never upsetting someone who appears to need protection. But innocence, when unexamined, can become a form of psychological camouflage, shielding the one who uses it from accountability while slowly making the other responsible for their emotional world. Truth 4. In its raw form, chaos is not inherently destructive. It is energy, fluid, untamed, and emotionally charged. But when this energy is projected into relationship without self-awareness, it ceases to be creative and becomes corrosive. In Jungian language, this is the expression of an unintegrated shadow, where disowned emotion spills into the external world, demanding containment from others. The chaotic woman often presents as passionate, spontaneous, deeply feeling. Her presence is intense, even magnetic, but her emotional landscape is unstable. Moods shift without clear cause. Joy quickly becomes accusation. Vulnerability morphs into hostility. One moment she is intimate, the next withdrawn. These cycles do not resolve, they repeat. This repetition is not random. It serves a purpose. The unpredictability creates a relational environment that prioritizes reaction over reflection. The partner becomes occupied not with connection, but with regulation, monitoring tone, anticipating shifts, managing escalation. The relationship becomes reactive, not reciprocal. When a woman is possessed by her own unexamined chaos, she externalizes it. She does not process emotion internally. She discharges it into the space between. The partner is then assigned the role of emotional container. He becomes the stable one, the calm one, the strong one, until that stability is slowly eroded by the unending demand to absorb. This dynamic is unsustainable. Containment is not healing. Absorption is not intimacy. Over time, the man's own inner structure begins to collapse under the weight of unreciprocated emotional labor. He loses access to clarity, presence, and internal boundaries. His nervous system remains in a state of hypervigilance, not out of fear, but out of necessity. Jung observed that chaos, when not transformed within, seeks to dominate without. In relational terms, this means emotional disorder becomes a means of control. The woman may not consciously intend harm, but by refusing to hold her own emotional complexity, she compels the partner to hold it for her. This is not partnership. It is energetic imbalance, and no amount of patience or grounding can compensate for another person's refusal to become responsible for their inner world. Truth 5. In psychologically unstable dynamics, truth is not rejected because it is false. It is rejected because it threatens the internal narrative. A woman who has not developed emotional security may unconsciously depend on a fixed story to maintain a sense of control, often casting herself as the misunderstood victim and her partner as the one who must continually explain, prove, or atone. This is not simple dishonesty. It is narrative defense. When reality conflicts with emotional expectation, the facts are reinterpreted. Tone is questioned, timing is scrutinized, motives are recast. Even genuine vulnerability offered by the partner may later be used as ammunition, proof of inadequacy, weakness, or guilt. Carl Jung described the shadow as the part of the psyche we refuse to acknowledge, often projecting it onto others. In this context, projection serves to preserve self-image by distorting relational feedback. The woman does not engage with what is being said. She engages with what she fears is being implied. The partner's truth is filtered through her unresolved insecurities and reshaped to fit the emotional story she already believes. This creates a psychological double bind. The partner may act with clarity and openness, yet be met with suspicion or accusation. He becomes hyper-aware of language, tone, and implication. Over time, he may stop expressing entirely, not out of dishonesty, but out of exhaustion. His internal compass weakens as external narratives grow louder. In these dynamics, communication is not used to reach understanding. It is used to reinforce a predetermined script. Any deviation from that script, any assertion of a different perspective, is perceived as betrayal. The woman is not seeking dialogue. She is seeking confirmation of her frame. This is not malicious behavior. It is a defense against internal chaos. When the psyche cannot tolerate ambiguity or accountability, it seeks safety in fixed meaning, even if that meaning is false. The partner's lived reality is sacrificed for emotional security that can only exist inside the woman's psychological story. A relationship governed by narrative distortion does not evolve, it revolves, cycling through the same arguments, the same accusations, the same emotional positions. And unless the underlying projection is recognized and addressed, the truth becomes irrelevant, because only one version is allowed to exist. Truth 6. Relational testing is often misunderstood as evaluation. In reality, it is compensation. A woman who chronically tests her partner through withdrawal, provocation, or contradiction is not examining him. She is managing her own internal instability. These tests are not rooted in curiosity or discernment. They are driven by fear, the fear of abandonment, of being seen fully, of surrendering control. The behaviors appear indirect: passive-aggressive remarks, emotional distance, inconsistent affection, but they are not subtle in function. Each one is designed to provoke a response, not to gauge compatibility, but to restore a feeling of power. Carl Jung's work on projection applies here with precision. When unresolved insecurity is not confronted internally, it is projected relationally. The partner becomes the object through which the woman attempts to regulate her own uncertainty. She creates disruption in order to observe how he reacts. If he pursues, she feels desired. If he withdraws, she confirms her belief that love is unsafe. Either way, the cycle continues, not to bring the relationship forward, but to preserve emotional familiarity. These tests do not measure strength, they measure compliance. The more the partner performs, the less he is respected. The dynamic rewards anxiety and punishes authenticity. Stability is perceived as boring. Boundaries are experienced as rejection. The woman is not seeking intimacy, she is seeking leverage. This is not conscious manipulation, it is emotional survival. For individuals who have learned that love must be earned, testing becomes a ritual. Drama becomes validation, challenge becomes connection. But this frame is incompatible with relational maturity. It replaces mutual respect with conditional affection. In such dynamics, the partner becomes reactive rather than present. He begins to confuse endurance with devotion, intensity with intimacy. Over time, he internalizes the idea that love must be proven through pain and that peace is a sign of emotional failure. Testing is not inherently toxic, but when it is constant, unconscious, and rooted in insecurity, it becomes a mask for deeper avoidance. And until that avoidance is made conscious, no amount of loyalty will bring stability, because the woman is not looking for connection. She is looking for confirmation that she is worth holding, even when she refuses to be held. Truth 7. Love, when spoken from a fragmented self, becomes contradiction. A woman may say, "I love you," and mean it, but if she has not confronted her own unconscious patterns, the love she offers cannot remain stable. It will fluctuate according to her inner conflicts, not her conscious intent. Carl Jung emphasized that the shadow, the denied, repressed aspects of the psyche, does not disappear. It governs behavior from beneath awareness. When the shadow remains unexamined, relationships become the stage upon which it is projected. Idealization turns to resentment. Desire turns to control. Intimacy collapses into accusation. A woman disconnected from her shadow will unconsciously reenact unresolved relational wounds. She may recreate abandonment to maintain control over its timing. She may provoke distance to test loyalty. She may demand presence, yet withdraw when it is offered. These contradictions do not indicate deception. They reflect a self at war with itself. In such dynamics, the partner is not being met. He is being used as a mirror, a container, a regulator. His needs are secondary. His boundaries are interpreted as disinterest. His silence becomes evidence of guilt. The relationship becomes a cycle of emotional reenactment, not mutual growth. This is not a question of malice. It is a matter of psychic integration. Until a woman has consciously acknowledged her own grief, anger, distrust, and shame, she cannot love freely. She may want love, she may chase closeness, but her actions will be governed by defense, not devotion. The man who remains in such a dynamic often assumes he is failing. He tries to be more patient, more present, more understanding. But the issue is not his lack of effort. It is the absence of reciprocity. He is not in a relationship. He is in a rescue loop, attempting to stabilize someone whose internal world rejects stillness. A mature relationship does not begin with love. It begins with self-awareness. Until both individuals can hold their own emotional weight, no connection will feel safe. And when one partner refuses to meet their shadow, the other will eventually be consumed by it. Now that you know the 7 truths, the question is no longer about her. The question is about you. You've seen how emotional control can wear the face of softness. How chaos becomes magnetic when your nervous system confuses fear with love. How withholding is used to shift blame, and how projection turns relationships into reenactments. You've seen how loyalty, when given blindly, becomes self-abandonment, and how love without shadow work becomes performance, not presence. This isn't about blame, it's about discernment. It's about knowing when emotional intensity is just unprocessed pain, when validation is demanded, not earned, when love is used to extract compliance rather than foster connection. You cannot teach someone to hold your truth if they are still afraid of their own. You cannot earn intimacy from someone using distance as leverage. And you cannot build peace with someone who only feels alive in conflict. Clarity is not cruelty. Boundaries are not abandonment. And leaving is not failure when staying would require your disappearance. Now that you know the 7 truths, the question is no longer about her. It's this: what part of you was willing to betray your own truth, just to keep the illusion of hers alive?